So good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Pauline Cassart. I'm from the Walloon Agricultural Research Center in Belgium. And part of my research within Agroecology-TRANSECT was about exploring the barriers and levers faced by the 11 Innovation Hub that are at the core of our Agroecology-TRANSECT project. And that's what we are addressing today together. So first, quick introduction on how the research was carried out. The objective of the research was really to support reflection and learning within and across the Innovation Hub. We had different cycles of data collection, analysis, and reflection with local stakeholders from the Innovation Hub. Data collection was mainly centered around interviews that were carried out either online, on-site, or at project workshop. And those interviews were done with a diversity of key complementary actors from each Innovation Hub. And within those interviews, we explored different topics and notably the barriers and levers faced by each Innovation Hub. So based on this deep investigation of barriers and levers faced by each Innovation Hub, the goal here was to highlight some trends across our sample of initiative. And we have categorized the barriers and levers identified according to 6 main dimensions that you can see here. So we have knowledge and information, policy, economy and market, society and culture, infrastructure and natural environment, and social organization and cooperation network. And I will now illustrate some important barriers or levers identified across our sample of initiative in each of those dimensions. So let's start with knowledge and information. The lack of practical knowledge on agroecological practices was a common barrier across Innovation Hub. And this is illustrated, for instance, in this quote from a farmer from the Danish Innovation Hub working in conservation agriculture. So we see he is talking about the little knowledge available on direct seeding in conservation agriculture. This lack of knowledge on agroecological practices is tackled by the Innovation Hub in different ways. For instance, through knowledge exchange among farmers, on-farm experiments, or collaboration with other stakeholders. Then, still in knowledge and information, many factors were also related to the new advisory and research role in agroecology. And it was frequently mentioned across Innovation Hub that the valorization of practitioner knowledge and experience and having a facilitative advisory approach are important levers. And this is reflected in the following quote from one Danish advisor, highlighting that the role of the advisor is not so much to tell the farmer what to do, but rather to discuss things, to ask him questions, and to facilitate the process. However, many challenges related to that new advisory and research role were also identified across Innovation Hub. And this difficulty is reflected in this quote from one Belgian researcher. And she said that they try to have this shift in the way they advise to something where they co-construct things, but it's not easy to have this position. And this difficulty can be explained notably by the lack of skills in facilitation of advisors and researchers, or by the difficulty for advisors to advise practices that are riskier also for the farmer, or the difficulty to leave the expert role, as this role is also expected from the farmer, that advisor and researcher take that role. So now in terms of policy, the inconsistency in EU national or local regulations for agroecology was a very common barrier across our sample of initiative. And it's interesting to see how Innovation Hub are tackling this barrier, because some Innovation Hub feels they don't have the capacity to tackle this important political barrier, while others are really engaged in advocacy. We see, for instance, in Bulgaria here, they are engaged in advocacy to increase the support of high nature value farmers, mainly at a national scale. Then in the Netherlands, we will hear from Maria later on, but they are advocating for strip cropping, and they faced improvement there with the inclusion of strip cropping as an eco scheme in the national policy. And in Guadeloupe, but also in Hungary or Spain, they are also engaging with local policymakers around agroecology. Then, in terms of economy and market, the limited economic profitability of agroecological farmers is a common barrier. It's reinforced by the lack of demand from consumer, but also the lack of competitiveness of agroecological products. And the Innovation Hub are using diverse strategies to tackle this. For instance, some are trying to get closer to the consumer. This is observed in Guadeloupe with this quote from a Guadeloupe farmer, but also in Slovenia or Spain. And other innovation hubs, such as in the Netherlands, in Denmark, are working on increasing the acceptance and demand from more conventional economic actors for agroecological products. In Romania, they are working on increasing access to the market by collective sales of their product under a specific brand, here under Bio Danubius brand. And finally, also, of course, the availability of aid funds for farmers is an important lever there also. Then, still in economy and market, we also observe limited financial and human resources of the Innovation Hub Collective as an important barrier for their development. And they are developing different levels to this, funding through research projects, funding from foundation or from profit activities, and also the cooperation networks are important lever there. Now, in relation to society and culture, the awareness of the urgency and seriousness of the climate situation and the need for change is an important factor. It influences consumer demand, but also farmer motivation to adopt agroecological practices. And sadly, the negative effect of climate change is a way to highlight the resilience of agroecological system, but also the need for change. Then, in terms of infrastructure and natural environment, the lack of adapted machinery and infrastructure is common across Innovation Hub. The lack of adapted machinery reinforces technical challenges on fields, for instance, for weed or pest management. Here we have a nice example from the Belgium Innovation Hub with a machinery that's really useful for them as they are working in organic conservation agriculture. And here we have a photo from the Spanish Innovation Hub, and they highlighted the lack of processing infrastructure, which challenge the transformation of the products and the opportunity to get closer to the consumer. Last but not least, in terms of social organization and cooperation network, we see that being surrounded by diverse and supportive cooperation networks is an important lever across the Innovation Hub. And also the diversity of skills and profiles within the Innovation Hub was mentioned. However, the lack of commitment of some initiative stakeholders is also quite frequent across Innovation Hub. And for this, the perception of added value by the participant to be part of the Innovation Hub seem important, of course, and also the development of trust among participants and having an ongoing dialogue on needs, results, and expectations are critical levers. So some key takeaways. Throughout the presentation, we have explored some of the major barriers faced by the 11 Innovation Hub and also some of the strategies that they have implemented to tackle them. It's important to emphasize that these solutions are tailored to specific context, and so we don't pretend to present one-size-fits-all solution to these complex challenges. Instead, the goal has been to share ideas and proposals that come directly from practitioners working in the field. And as a final thought, I would like to share this figure that I saw at an event last week, because I think it seemed very complex, but the goal is that you don't read it all here, but I think it perfectly encapsulates the point of our discussion today, because the figure illustrates the numerous interconnected components of the food system. And in this complex figure, here we see the farmer. So it really highlights the importance of considering the food system in all its complexity when we are addressing issues such as barrier and levers to agroecology in Europe. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward for the questions.
Pauline, thank you so much for your insight, and thank you for presenting it in such a clear way, because it's obviously a very complex thing and a huge amount of research that you've done to get there, and you've made it sound very simple to me, who's not very smart. So thank you very much indeed. We're really lucky to have Pauline, and we're also very sad because she's coming to the end of her time working on Agroecology-TRANSECT now. She's completed this body of work, so we're really chuffed that you could join us today for this session. Just a reminder for everyone in the audience, if you have a question, Nathan had a really brilliant question. Could I ask that you put it in the Q&A section? So at the bottom of the screen, if you can't see the Q&A tab, click more and you may see it, rather than the chat. That way we're more likely to see it and be able to ask that question to the panelists. And also I'm going to ask Pauline a few questions now, but we thought, given that we've got a real rich array of panelists, we'd try and find the best questions from the audience to ask at the end of the roadshow. So make sure if you're asking a question now, say who you want to ask that question to, and the reason is, I think it'd be really rich to bring in several different people. And as we work through the day, there's a lot of common threads that will run through what we hear about around barriers and levers. So thanks very much, and remember, put them in the Q&A. I had a couple of questions listening to that. I'm really interested by the concept of the kind of areas that you kind of put the barriers and the levers into, the dimensions. But I wondered if any in particular, if there was one in particular that stood out to you that was kind of a big dimension, bigger than others in terms of being a barrier to kind of scaling out agroecology in Europe.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tim, for this question and for your comment. But so, as I presented, in each of the 6 dimensions, we found both barrier and levers that were identified by the stakeholders in the field. But I would say that the political dimension was a particularly key challenge for many innovation hubs. And this can be explained by different points, because first, agricultural policy really shapes the environment in which the farmer makes decisions, offering constraints or benefits. And many innovation have highlighted the lack of consistency in those regulations for agroecology. Then I think that this political dimension also seems particularly challenging as it feels particularly hard to tackle at the scale of one individual or one initiative. And I remember one farmer telling us in the interview that all technical challenges on the field, they will solve it together with the farmers, with the researcher, advisors. But the difficulty really lied in the institutional framework in which they are. And this highlights the importance of the institutional framework and also the feeling of practitioners to have little control over it compared to other dimensions. And maybe one last point, I think that this political dimension also heavily impacts other dimensions, such as in particular another dimension which is very important, the economy and market. Because farmers' incomes, for example, are directly influenced by political decisions, like the availability of subsidies, the protection for agroecological products against imports, for instance. We have big agreements that are discussed at the moment on EU tables, for instance, about the Mercosur. So I think that these political factors are also shaping the economy of farmers, and which in turn also affect farmer motivation to adopt agroecological practices. Because, yeah, of course, farming is a job for many farmers, so they need to get satisfactory income from their activities, of course.
So I guess kind of what you're saying is this political dimension is particularly important because it has such a big impact on the economic situation of farmers and how much they earn to live and survive. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think that this political dimension is very important because it's also influenced by other dimensions such as economy and market, which is also as much important as this political dimension, of course. And I think that there we as consumer, we have a main impact also to play in the way we eat and the choices we make. Yeah.
Thank you. No one on this call will be kind of not aware of the huge climate extremes that we're facing increasingly, and even, you know, very recently. And we had, yeah, everyone's experienced extreme climate events to an increasing degree. Did that feature in your research much of what was coming out of the innovation hubs? How much did they mention climate change as a barrier or a lever?
Yeah, that was kind of interesting because we really have a trade-off there in relation to climate change, because on one side, of course, climate change negatively impact production, it creates new challenges on field, and also a need to constantly adapt to new climate situation. But on the other side, it was also mentioned by the Innovation Hub that they observe sometimes an increased awareness of the urgency of the situation by society, but also by policymakers, due to the negative effect of climate change. So yeah, this also revealed kind of an opportunity there. So yeah, there is a trade-off in relation to climate change in
Right.
the answer from the Innovation Hub.
And I think we're going to come to that as well. Climate change is going to come up again later, so with some of the other speakers, so we will revisit that. Finally, and I guess I'm aware that your research was very much looking at what has been done by innovation hubs, but looking kind of forward and next steps, did anything come out as being a kind of really obvious lever, say that these initiatives would love to see implemented to help, you know, boost their agroecological journey?
Yeah. So yeah, quick clarification. So I focused the research indeed on barrier and levers that were implemented in the past of the Innovation Hub. So I did not explore the possible levers for the future, but yeah, of course, I have some examples in mind from the discussion we have with the stakeholders. I'm not sure if those are easy levers, but I think they are obvious, so it's important to mention. I think that, of course, the demand, an increased demand for agroecological products from consumers, but also from other value chain actors, is an obvious and important lever. And there, we as consumer, as I just say, we play an important role through the way we eat, the choices we make. And in relation to that, some actors that I met also mentioned the need for public policies supporting the consumption of agroecological products by society. Also related to subsidies, of course, a better allocation of subsidies for agroecological farmers was frequently mentioned. For instance, a better translation to the local context, better adapted to scale and practices, agroecological practices. And also in relation to subsidies, many actors also emphasize the need for support of the farmer at the beginning of the transition to compensate the risk taken in transition into another system, and also the possible high investment cost at the start of the transition.
Great. Thanks, Pauline. Again, really, really rich presentation and answers. And I would encourage people to keep putting your questions into the Q&A as well. And as I say, we'll ask you to come back, I think, at the end so that we can answer, yeah, more questions.